Following the amendments to the rules against using a mobile phone or similar device whilst driving, I've received lots of different questions which I'm going to seek to address in this video. And before you say, no, this is not an April Fool's video, that one was this morning, so you can check that out in the description below. Anyway, some of the questions I've been asked include, is it okay to use a GoPro or some similar device? Or is it okay to use the phone whilst it's in a cradle, and things of this nature? Now, first of all, it's important to look at what is defined in these regulations. And under the mobile phones, it is defined fairly broadly as a handheld mobile telephone or a handheld device of a kind specified in subparagraph 4. And in subparagraph 4, it says a device referred to is a device other than a two-way radio which performs an interactive communication function by transmitting and receiving data. Now, there's two very important things to say about this. The first is that the court has said that even the phone communicating with the car is the communication, transmitting and receiving of data, so it doesn't have to go to the internet. But this has now been amended, so it now reads, instead of performs, it reads is capable of transmitting and receiving data, whether or not those capabilities are enabled. In other words, if the device, whether it's a phone or a GoPro or whatever it is, if it is capable of transmitting or receiving data, and it's in your hand and you are using it, then it is a device for the purposes of these regulations. So quite obviously, a GoPro is a device which is capable of transmitting and receiving data. It can go live on the internet, it can transmit it to your phone and all sorts of things. So for the meaning of these regulations, a GoPro is a handheld device which is capable of transmitting and receiving data, whether or not those capabilities are enabled at the time of use or not. In other words, you will be in breach of these regulations if you are holding a GoPro, filming as you're going about, because it is capable of transmitting and receiving data. So this is a no-no as well. On to the second question about whether or not your phone is in a cradle. Now, even before I answer the question, there is an important caveat which I'll come to after, so make sure you listen to the caveat as well. Now, as to the question of using your phone in a cradle, the important paragraph is subparagraph 6, which says, for the purposes of this regulation, a mobile telephone or other device is to be treated as handheld if it is or must be held at some point during the course of making or receiving a call or performing any other interactive communication function. Therefore, it follows that if the phone is in the cradle securely and it remains in the cradle and at no point does it have to be in your hand, you can take a phone call, provided it's on loudspeaker or on earphones or something like that, so long as it is completely hands-free and it's not distracting you, which I'll come back to in a moment. Now, I've also spoken to the Department for Transport and they've confirmed that this view is accurate. So long as the phone is in the cradle and remains in the cradle, you can still take a phone call. However, here comes the caveat, and it's twofold. If your phone is in a cradle and you answer a telephone call whilst your phone is in the cradle, firstly, not only might there be an argument that it still must at some point be handheld, thus being breach of the regulations, but if you are distracted by it, even if it's in the cradle, you will almost certainly be held accountable for careless or dangerous driving. So just leave it well alone, unless it's completely hands-free and you can ensure that you're not going to be distracted by taking the telephone call. So on the face of it, whilst these regulations are widening the scope for any device which is held in the hand whilst driving, I suspect there are going to be a significant number of arguments alleging that the device must at some point be held in the hand. Therefore, arguably, you're in breach of the regulations. And in the alternative, careless or dangerous driving. So your best bet is using a Bluetooth headset, voice commands, or making absolutely certain that you do not have to hold the device at any time to perform the function that you are using it for at that moment in time. But remember, whenever there is a very narrowly similar offence for which you could be held accountable, there is always this alternative which will be made easier by the similarity. In other words, careless driving by not being in full control of the vehicle at that moment. Other questions raised are, what is the difference if you're a professional driver such as an HGV driver? Well, there is no difference. You are still driving. You would still be held accountable to the same rules. Other questions have been about supervising somebody whilst using a mobile telephone. But even in the original regulations, it said that no person shall supervise a holder of a provisional license if the person supervising is using a handheld mobile telephone or a handheld device as specified in paragraph 4, at any time when the provisional license holder is driving the motor vehicle on a road. And of course there are the exemptions that I remind you, which are of course calling the police, fire or ambulance in a genuine emergency, and now using the phone for a contactless payment if the goods are delivered then or shortly afterwards. So I hope that's cleared up some of the questions, so please drive safely out there and thanks for watching.